Hello. Normally I come into a conversation, thank you, with people like this with a single thought of what I want to deliver. Right now I'm just thinking, don't swear, don't swear. Right, hopefully this is going to work. Okay, so what I've done is set up a regional social enterprise called Asia Pacific LOHAS. LOHAS stands for Lifestyles of Health and Sustainability. It's referring to an ideal, and it's an ideal that hopefully every one of us can live and aspire to in turn. But the point about LOHAS is it's a journey, as most of these things are. And I find it very difficult to talk about journeys without, well, I cannot separate my own journey. So really the best way of me to describe LOHAS is to talk about my journey to LOHAS and then to try to expand that a little bit more about what we're trying to do. I wasn't born in an English woodland, but I was born in England. And I spent a lot of my childhood basically romping around places like this on bikes and running around with my friends and climbing trees and understanding my environment, which was a small town. It wasn't that rural, but it was surrounded by woodland, and it was a great place to grow up. I was the kid that you would buy the nature book for. I was the kid that wanted to be the vet. I was loving animals. It was all about that for me. And then somewhere along the line, I discovered I could play rugby, and that kind of started to dominate my life. So I forgot for a while about nature. I went to university because the university said, come along, play rugby. You don't need any decent grades, so that was great. So then I went to university, and I muddled my way through university. Well, probably I just played rugby through university. And I came out with a degree somehow that wasn't too bad. I had a couple of job offers, but I had no planning of my career. Those are the days you could get away with it. And I had two job offers to choose from. One was marketing holidays, and the other one was selling shampoo. I decided to sell shampoo. Go figure. But there was only one reason, because they gave me a car, and that was cool. So I started selling shampoo, and I went to work with Procter & Gamble. Bizarrely, you might find this bizarre now, I'd never heard of. And I started selling shampoo, and I was pretty good at it. And then I decided to leave Procter & Gamble for my own reasons, and I joined another company equally famous called L'Oreal. And I started selling a bit more shampoo, and some skincare, and hair colorant. So if you need any advice on that, I can help you with that. I was doing quite well. I was basically in sales management, and I got to the point where, you come to forks in your road in the career. None of mine were planned. And then one of them, they said, would you consider going to Hong Kong? Which I thought, why not? I'd been to Hong Kong once playing rugby, obviously, and thought it was pretty cool. So I decided we'd go to Hong Kong. And I arrived in Hong Kong in 1998, in April 1998. And I was then the commercial director for Asia Pacific for L'Oreal. And guess what? I was selling more shampoo, a lot more. Now, the journey that I took within Hong Kong that I want to talk about was basically a work-related journey, although I was still playing rugby. And I was traveling a lot, and my job was to go to several markets and find out who was the last woman in Asia using lipstick, and where did she buy it from. Now, it's pretty cool to do that. I was 28 years old. This is a great opportunity. So I'm traveling all around the place, and particularly let's talk about China. In China, I traveled to 43 cities over a period of 3 years. Now, when you look at 43 cities in China, you start to graduate down from primary cities, secondary cities, tertiary cities, and then you hit what they call towns, which are pretty big, where I came from. But you go to these places, and the interesting thing that you start to see as you sort of get away from the glitz and the glamour is you start to see something happening in these communities that isn't necessarily great. By the way, I was still looking for lipstick users. And what I started to understand was that these communities themselves were chasing a dream that had nothing to do with where they came from. It had nothing to do with the culture that was inherent in their country, and was basically leading to massive environmental destruction in their communities, as well as human rights problems and poor sanitation where they lived. So although this isn't a picture I took, I mean, this is actually a picture from a river in India. This is actually not dissimilar to what I was encountering pretty much every business trip that I went to China, India, Philippines, Malaysia particularly, because I used to have to go up country in all these markets. I'd like to say at this point that, well, it would be great of me to say at this point I decided to quit, but I didn't. At this point I decided to just carry on selling more shampoo. And I kind of became blind to it. I was concerned by it, but I was a little bit blind to it. Something happened to me in Hong Kong was that I met my now wife, and I was playing rugby for Hong Kong at the time. And my wife is a yoga teacher. Now, rugby and yoga don't necessarily mix if you know anything about the two. So I was, and let's be honest, we met each other because we thought each other pretty cute, so that's why we got together. As I was trying to impress my girlfriend desperately, I started to go to her yoga classes, and her spin classes, by the way, and every class she ever did. And I was the guy at the front, going like this, watching everything. But something important happened to me, though, in that journey with my wife, or then girlfriend, was that I met a bunch of really crazy, weird people that did yoga and ate vegetarian food and wore like flowing cotton and stuff like that, and had weird facial hair. And I liked them. I did. And I was a rugby player. Normally rugby players hate these sort of people because you're not playing rugby, you don't work out in the gym 5 days a week, and you don't like to beat the other guy up. And so, drink loads of beer. So I started this journey in Costa Rica where she was being trained, and then I pretty much went to all the places she went for her retreats, and I met more and more of these people, and it was a wonderful experience. Again, at this stage, I'd like to tell you that I quit corporate and started to do what I'm doing now, but I didn't. What I did is I moved to Singapore, but there's a journey to get to Singapore that's quite important as well. I left L'Oreal. I played rugby full-time for a while, and then I got sucked back into corporate life, selling cosmetics, so shampooed cosmetics. And then from cosmetics, I then went, still in Hong Kong, I then went to work for a major retailer where I was basically in charge of buying branded products across 8,500 shops globally. The penny started to drop in that particular job because I was also sitting next to the team, and the team being about 100 people that were sourcing stuff out of China to sell in the shops. When you buy your shampoo and your cosmetics, you see that stuff that you just pick up you hadn't expected to buy. And I understood that they didn't really care about where the product came from, what it was made of. They just wanted to get the China price, as it was then. It's down the Bangladeshi price or the Sri Lanka price or whatever price it might be. I got headhunted from that job to become the CEO of Molton Brown, which is basically posh shampoo. It's expensive shampoo. And I moved to Singapore. And it was another big, bright, glitzy place. While I was selling this shampoo for Molton Brown, we were selling small bottles to hotels. And that's how a lot of people find Molton Brown, or to airlines. So at this point, I think in 2.5-year period, I probably sold close to 50 million small bottles of plastic. Now, these things build, I find, or it did with me, it becomes cumulative. And there came a point where, yes, I was trekking in Laos, thank you very much. Actually, it sounds like I was on a major trek, but I literally went for a day trek in Laos. And I was 38. I became a CEO when I was 36, which by most measures of the modern world is fantastic. Yet as I kept going through those career changes, I never felt satisfied. And I always thought that was because I needed to be a bigger CEO, or I needed more money, or I needed a better car, or I needed whatever I needed. But actually, I just wasn't feeling good here in my heart, or wherever my soul is, I'm not really sure. So I wasn't feeling great. And when I was in Laos, I went to a small Hmong village. It wasn't actually a village, actually. It was just a clearing with one dwelling. And in the dwelling, the extended family lived. And it was right on the top of a hill, and it was in the middle of basically of wilderness. And the Hmong people have had a difficult time, but this particular community had been well looked after by tourism. They'd done it responsibly, and it was great, which is why I picked to go on the trek. And they were happy. They were so happy. They had nothing by our measure, or my measure, but they were really happy. It gave me a bit of a time to soul search. And then finally, I can say this was the point where I had my moment. Okay, so it's probably 8 years later than it should have happened. But 8 years later than it should have happened, I decided I needed to quit. So I quit. And I decided I wanted to do something better. So I thought, well, saving the planet's a good thing. Let's try that. Now, So, of course, the question is then, how do you save the planet? So I thought, and somebody said something, one of the speakers before said something I thought was great, and I'm sorry I can't remember exactly who said it, but I think it might have been James. If you have a skill, you talked about dents, that right, from Steve Jobs. If you have a skill and you acquire a skill and you build a skill up over a period of time, you almost have an obligation to use that skill. So I decided to look back into what I knew, selling shampoo, and to try to understand, well, really, what, apart from selling shampoo, what were the skills entailed to do that, and try to use that to try to make a difference. So that was my seed of thought. Then I got in contact with an organization in the States called LOHAS. I was put in contact with them through somebody in my network or some colleague. I spoke to LOHAS quite at length, and they told me that they were trying to promote conscious consumption in the States, and that sounded pretty cool, and I tried to understand what that meant. So I went away and I did a bit of research, and I found out that LOHAS in Asia actually is a bit more interesting than it is in the States, in as much as in Northeast Asia, Japan, Taiwan, Korea, Shanghai, and even now in Hong Kong, LOHAS is being used by everyday people to describe a way of life. And nobody's telling them to use LOHAS, it's just being used. So nobody owns LOHAS, by the way. It's a Creative Commons brand. Well, that was very interesting to me as a brand guy, product guy, somebody who's good at marketing. I thought I can use that. So what is conscious consumption? Let's try to get back to the core of the topic. Conscious consumption is where we make a choice to not drink bottled water, to try to drink water that comes out of a tap. Even I couldn't find tap water here just before. Why? Because why drink bottled water when you can drink water out of a tap? Just don't quite get it. Conscious consumption means, if you've got the choice between taking the subway to work and driving to work, you would choose the subway for the right reasons. So you're making a conscious choice to do something, and it so happens that that choice, the reason you're making it is because you make it because it's better for the world, or you perceive it to be better for the world. There's also health aspects. When you make a conscious decision to eat organic food or to eat less meat, you're making it for health reasons. From a LOHAS perspective, what that means is that you try to understand, first of all, what works for you and what is better for you. And then as a result of doing that, you start to ask some questions. Where did that food come from? What's in that food? And as you ask those questions, your awareness grows of all the other issues around growing food. Soil quality, air quality, water quality, and you start to expand your consciousness into the world outside of you, which is our planet. And then you become concerned equally with personal and planetary health. Now, what does this all have to do with this slide? Well, in Asia, and I've lived in Asia for 14 years, and I think my skills have been learnt in Asia, so I need to use my skills in Asia. In Asia, we have roughly 4 billion people. Of those 4 billion people, depends on what classification you use, 500 million of them are what we would call middle-class consumers, and they're the people that are basically driving all consumption in Asia. The stuff that the IBMs, the P&Gs, the L'Oreals are chasing after, it's these people here. So how are they consuming today? Well, the way they're consuming today is not particularly consciously. I won't say that it's deliberately unconscious. It's just how it's happened. It's the system. And the big issue for me was one of economics. I was an economics graduate, by the way, I've got to say that. And the thing I was looking at was if those 500 million today are consuming, and we know that the resources are running out, and we know that the way that they're consuming is not particularly good for the society that we live in, but more importantly for the planet at large, just imagine what happens when the 3,500 million people who are not consuming in Asia start to consume. And you don't need to be an economist to understand that we don't have enough resources. We don't have enough planet to sustain that. So therefore, I felt that we need to work, first of all, on what is the model of consumption that is currently there today in Asia and is the aspirational model of consumption, because people by nature want to aspire to something. They want to feel that they can improve in their lives, and we shouldn't stop that. But in that, they need to try to work out what they're going to do. So we start to work on that. And then you can talk about systems and how the systems work within that. So we have two. The good news about all this is if we're going to guide these people, they already exist today somewhere in the world, technologies, models, ways of living that we can start to build upon. And then what we need to do is draw back into the cultures of Asia to make them Asian. So the point of this slide is that we could go to Copenhagen right now and we could cycle everywhere and we could take the public transport, and it's a fantastic place to do. Now, if you were to try to do that in somewhere like Hong Kong, Or like in Singapore, where I do it, I cycle to work everywhere in Singapore, or I cycle everywhere in Singapore. And this little image here on the bottom is my face mask after 5 days of commuting and riding my bike in Singapore. So you can't go and suddenly put a system that exists onto the current system without trying to change it and dig deep into it. The system today is currently based around 4 things: government, finance, companies, and people. So at the moment, this is pretty much a reflection of the power that is currently perceived to be in that system. Government and finance and corporates are perceived to have all the power. But what we often miss and we don't understand as individuals is that the reality of the situation, that if we were to consume consciously and enough of us made the right choices in the right direction, we are the most important thing. Just by making those choices and enough of us making the right choices, the finance, the governments, and the companies have no choice but to follow us because they want our money. So that's what we need to do. It means about looking at the systems, of course. It means putting in the infrastructure. It means making the products available and not flying them all over the world. So there's a lot of work to be done to get there. Which brings us back to LOHAS and what we're trying to do. So that's effectively the whole premise of why I'm standing here, why somebody thought it was interesting enough to let me babble on. And we've got lots of things. We're trying to work with consumers, of course. And you know, we're looking at some, I hope, pretty neat ways of trying to engage consumers to understand what this means. We're working with companies where I have a vision where I can get every small, medium enterprise in the world that has well, they all should, but has a sustainable agenda together in this network that we have at the bottom of that slide. And in that network, they can collaborate, and we'll keep it free forever, and we'll try to marshal the resources, and we'll try to bring them to the people more concretely. My big, big vision is if we have enough people in the social network and enough people in the business network, we can get rid of the infrastructure altogether and marry the 2 things together, and then deliver it locally to everybody and meet their needs, and we can live consciously. So that's really it in a nutshell. I've only been doing this for a year. We have a long way to go. I suppose the coolest thing to say is that when, and hopefully you all will have your own epiphany if you already haven't, and there's some great people up here in front of me and to follow me who've had these moments. When you have these moments, the most exciting thing about it is I know what I'm doing with the rest of my life. Do you know what you're doing with yours?